All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Merrick Green with Law Firm General Counsel PC. We have most of our attendees signed in, and hopefully we'll get a few more in the next few minutes. But I think just to respect everyone's time, let's go ahead. Let's get going now. Everyone will get a copy of this presentation when we're done, and you can use the chat function to ask any questions as we're going. And then I will also give time at the end of the presentation for anyone to ask any questions. So during the presentation, if you could stay muted, that would be wonderful. And just during the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera so we can concentrate on the PowerPoint. Thank you so much, and hope you enjoy this presentation. So today we're going to talk about the Virginia, as I turn off my email, excuse me, the Virginia Emergency Standard Forms Generator and the Emergency Standard, Temporary Standard that's Virginia has required of all employers. This was something that was enacted back in July, and one of the things that we've really been talking to a lot of employers about is that this is required for almost all employers throughout Virginia. It is something that is from the small delicatessen to the gym to the 5,000 employee company. Everyone needs to have documents, compliance policies in place. And so what we tried to do here with the Virginia Standard Forms Generator is create an easy and inexpensive methodology for people to comply. So just quickly, as I said, my name is Merrick Green. I'm with the law firm General Counsel PC. We're based in McLean, Virginia, represent clients throughout the Virginia, DC metropolitan area, and then we serve as corporate counsel to a number of companies throughout the United States, as our name implies, as they're outside general counsel. Here with me today is David Peruano. You'll hear from him chiming in also. David's really helped us put together a lot of the materials that you get through the forms generator. And if you send in any questions, it might be him that actually answers them. So we've really appreciated David helping out. So just quickly, I think it's good to start off with a statement of Governor Northam. And I think it's good to highlight that Virginia is the only state in the country right now that has required businesses to put COVID safety measures in place for their workplace. I think that's important to highlight. And as stated by Governor Northam, keeping Virginia safe at work is not only a critical part of stopping the spread of the virus, but it's important to keep the economic recovery, and it's the right thing to do. And I think as I've talked to a lot of employers, they were frustrated that they had this responsibility. And I really think it is an opportunity for Virginia employers to do the right thing, for Virginia employers to talk to their employees and saying that we're doing everything we can while reopening to keep you safe, and talk to customers, clients, patrons, and saying we're doing everything we can to keep you safe. So it is really, I think, can be seen as a good thing to comply, put everything in place. And as you go through and with the forms generator we put together, it is really not tremendously onerous to do. So keep that in mind. So number one, the Emergency Temporary Standard became effective on July 27, 2020. It is enforced by the Virginia Occupational Safety and Health. It applies to almost all employers within Virginia. There's some very, very limited exceptions. Most documents for these employers had to have been in place by August 26th. So if you're sitting and listening here today and you do not have any of the compliance documentation, the policies, procedures, and training in place, technically you are in violation of this requirement for all Virginia employers. I don't think that you're going to get a $10,000 fine tomorrow. I don't think that you might even get a $10,000 fine, in the next month. I think the regulatory enforcement is probably going to be done through complaint processes. As far as I've heard, I don't think that the Virginia Occupational Safety and Health is going to be going out and conducting audits and going door to door to businesses, but there will be reporting by employees and customers for businesses who are not complying So, which is really why it's important to do. And as Governor Northam said, I think it's the right thing to do. There are two components, or two deadlines, if you will. So most employers just have to get everything in place by August 26th. For higher risk employers, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, you also have to have training in place for all of your employees by October 25th. And you actually need, it's the training in place, but you need to have an infectious plan, development plan in place. So applicability, as we talked about, it applies to almost all employers except maritime employers, contract-based employers for the U.S. Postal Service, and employers located within federal facilities. So that really is a broad swath of the Virginia workplace. And as we said, I imagine if not 100% of everyone listening here today, virtually 100% of everyone listening today, this law is applicable to you and you're required to put this in place. Risk categories. So within the emergency temporary standard, they defined employers into different risk categories. And based on that risk category, you need to take certain actions as part of your compliance. And that is very high, high, medium, and lower. I'm not just going to sit and read this to you, but just in general terms, very high, it's when you're doing dental work, where you're doing something that it is a high likelihood if someone has COVID, you're in close proximity to them, you will contract it from them based on the interaction. High is similar, you're within that distance, within 6 feet, and there's a likelihood based on that interaction there could be spread of COVID or other infectious disease. An example of that would be mental health, nursing homes, mortuary services, or the like. Most employers are going to fall into the medium or low. Low just quickly is the lawyer's office, the architect office, things along those lines where you can go into an office, you don't necessarily have day-to-day contact with customers, clients, you're doing your business on the phone, the computer, things along those lines. You can you're not interacting with the general public, or you can have more than 6 feet of distance. The medium is really where we're going to have a lot of the folks. These are customer-facing businesses where you're having interaction. It's the gyms, the food processing plants, restaurants, bars, spas, gyms, entertainment services. A lot of the businesses throughout Commonwealth of Virginia that are providing services directly to customers, clients, patrons. So that's where you'll have a lot of your categories. And as we'll talk about a little bit, if you're within that medium category, what you're required to do depends on how many employees you have. If you're 11 or more employees, you have a higher threshold that you must do than if you're under 11 employees. So just going very quickly. So as we talked about, the requirements for very high, high, and medium with 11 or more employees. So again, you're the dental office, you're the mental health professional, or you're the restaurant spa, so the medium level, but you have 11 or more employees. In that circumstance, there's you're all grouped together in what you need to do. And you need to comply with certain sanitation protocols, ensure that PPE is worn and worn properly. And this is one of the big differences between medium with under 11 and low is you need to implement this infectious disease prevention preparedness plan. And that's what has to be done by September 25th, I believe. So again, if you haven't done that, if you haven't done anything, you're in violation of the law because certain things were supposed to be done by August 26th. But if you're in this high, very high, or medium with more than 11, you also need to get this infectious disease prevention preparedness plan in place. The deadline for that is the 25th of September. And the final requirement for this group of employers is you need to have certain services for employers, mental health services, and the like. And again, one of the things that we've really tried to do in creating the emergency standard forms generator, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go along also, is there's a lot for small, medium-sized, even large employers to digest and determine what they need to do here. We've tried to create it as simple as possible, giving you a package that provides the policies, procedures, the training materials to help your company comply with the emergency temporary standard and provide a guideline, a template to help you do that with step-by-step instructions. So next slide is the medium requirements for medium, and that's 10 or fewer employees, and then the lower risk employers. And they still have certain requirements, sanitation equipment, ensure there's the social distancing, curbside or contest pickup for deliveries, and face coverings are worn properly. So jumping forward, implementation, as we already talked about, and I gave you these dates, most of the requirements for all employers were supposed to be in place by August 26th. Again, don't worry, if you haven't done it yet, the Virginia Occupational Safety and Health is not going to come knocking on your door and give you a $10,000 fine, tomorrow. But what you need to do is get these policies and procedures in place so that if you have a disgruntled employee or unhappy client or customer, they don't report you, because that's where, as far as we know in our discussions with the Occupational Safety and Health, they're going to be providing fines for companies. And as we'll talk about in a second, fines can be up to $135,000. So it's significant. That's going to be for an egregious circumstance, but it is something that companies need to be wary of. And at the low cost in which the forms generator is being provided, it's probably going to be less expensive to put all the policies and procedures in place than face a potential fine. And then for the medium with 11 or more and the high and very high employers, you need to put in place the infectious disease preparedness plan by September 25th. So you have another 10 days to get that in place. Penalties, as we talked about, penalties can range up to $135,000, and they'll be based on the severity and willfulness of the violation. For if you just don't have it in place, you're probably not going to face a huge fine. It's you know about it, you perhaps got one penalty, and you still don't do it. You'll get those really big fines. But again, it's just important that everyone gets it in place to move forward. So as we were talking with clients and colleagues over the past 2 months now that we've really been doing this, we realized in talking to the small, medium clients that we represent through our law firm, this is complicated. That smaller businesses, the local gym, the restaurant, even the CPA firm, the architecture firm, the construction company, these are all people that have bought and used this forms generator from us now. But we realized that if they were trying to do it on their own, either one, they'd have to contact the legal counsel and it would cost $2,000 or $3,000 to do it, or two, they might just not do it because they put their heads up in frustration, or three, they try to do it on their own. It would take, dozens upon dozens of hours, and that may or may not be correct. So we put together this emergency standards form generator that by answering, I think it's 3 or 4 simple questions, we can determine what you need and put together a package for you. It is a straightforward, basic package that can help you with the policies, procedures, and tools to comply. And we'll provide this to you again, but it's, there are 2 links here. Probably the easiest, covidcomplianceplans.com, or you can go to the General Counsel website and find the information from there also. So here's what you will get through the forms generator. So for medium risk employers with more than 11 employees, or that high risk or very high risk, for $350, and you get a discount code by watching this video today and using the discount code webinar, you get a 10% discount. You get an employer checklist and an employee checklist. I think these checklists are important, and it's not something that I think you can get from any other source out there, unless another law firm creates them for their clients. It tells you as an employer step by step what you need to do to comply with the emergency temporary standard. Same for the employee checklist. It helps the employee know what they need to do to be safe. It really is, as a company, telling your employees You care about them and want them to be safe. And quite honestly, as an economic matter, it's keeping your employees safe so you don't have a COVID breakout, so you don't need to shut down, so you can stay in business, so you can be safe. It is vitally important in that regard. The third thing you get is return to work plan. That is for employees who have been infected by COVID, having a plan on how they come back to work safely. You get a training PowerPoint materials. This is, I think it's a 30-page PowerPoint in Word format, just so we could get all the documents out through the Forms generator that you can hand out to all of your employees. You can go through it with your supervisors, so everyone has a bit of education about what to do to conduct and have a safe workplace. For these higher risk employers, you also get the Infectious Disease Preparedness Response Plan. Again, this is a significant plan on what you do as a company if you have an outbreak within your company. And then finally, you have an employee acknowledgement form where the employee acknowledges receiving this documentation. And I think this can be important for a number of reasons, one of which is liability protection. An employee gets COVID while, at work, or alleges he got it while at work, and, you're facing a lawsuit. And some states are putting in place COVID liability protection for employers, but Virginia does not have one, and we don't know whether or not it will pass one. But if you've done everything you're required to do as an employer, you're complying with the emergency temporary standard, you have that as an affirmative defense. Hey, we did everything we were supposed to do to comply with these regulations. If you don't have the compliance documents in place, you can just imagine a plaintiff's attorney, yelling to a jury, and they didn't even comply with the law. There should be liability. There was a law in place that they put this training in place, that they require certain policies, procedures, and training, and they didn't do it. So again, it's the best interest of the company, for a number of reasons, not only employee safety, but also liability protection. So that's the higher risk employers. So for medium risk with less than 10 employees, and the lower risk, you basically get the exact same thing for $250 that the higher risk employers get. You just don't need the infectious plan. So otherwise you get everything else. Just quickly, some reviews that we received. At this point, we've been offering this to the public now for probably, close to 3 or 4 weeks. We've sold several hundred of these. Employers throughout Virginia, ranging from, doctors' offices, construction companies, fitness facilities, law firms. There are a number of law firms that we do work with and that have bought it also. Restaurants, really, nursing homes have bought it. Really, anything across the board in almost any industry that we can think of have purchased these, provided us feedback. We've tweaked things here or there, and the feedback that we've gotten is a great, easy, inexpensive solution to helping employers comply with the emergency temporary standard. And just quickly, M3 Technology Consultants is an outsourced IT company. They were short and sweet. Thanks. These forms are great. They're awesome. Dan Sanders with Horse Sales is one of the preeminent estate sales companies here in the Northern Virginia area. And he said that the forms, thanks for them. It was an easy way to comply, less than 15 minutes, and to do it, get the payment, and receive the documents. One other review, which is a mouthful, but it reflects how excited she was. This was someone who had the responsibility within a company to create all the documents and make sure the company complied herself. We were actually working with a public relations person who was putting out some press releases, and this person was a friend, and the person who was doing the press release asked her friend to take a look at this, utilize it. So they actually got it, I think, for next to free, since they were sort of a test case. And this was the review that she sent. I just want to say thank you so much for creating this. She had spent 4 hours in trying to do it and was nervous about it and couldn't figure it out. and that the questions we had were short and easy to understand, and then getting the checklist and the other materials, it made it easy for her. And obviously she was a medium with 11 or more or a higher risk employer, so she also got the infectious disease preparedness plan, the return to work plan. She was excited that she didn't have to write that herself. And after, when she saw the training, I was even more ecstatic. Absolutely recommend this to others for the $250 or $350 price tag. The value far surpasses that, and the amount of time it saved me is intangible. So again, I hope we've sent this out, as I said, to and well over 100, 200 employers across Virginia that purchased it, and they found it very helpful to them in complying with the emergency temporary standard. So we wanted to keep this fairly short and sweet and make sure we had time for questions and other information that you might have. There's a discount code for anyone who is participating in this webinar, and just use all caps webinar, and you will receive a 10% discount. You can go to covidcomplianceplans.com, or you can also go to the law firm website, and there is the page for the VES forms generator. The links are both here. You can also email us at vesforms@gcpc.com, and I, or more likely David, will respond to you as soon as we can. And with that provides the summary. I don't know if folks have questions, and we can the easiest way to do that is probably through the chat function, if anyone has any questions. And we can go from there. But hopefully this is a good overview of the emergency temporary standards, so employers sort of know what they need to do and how to comply. Whether you try to do it on your own or use our forms generator, it's something that all employers need to do, and we just try to provide a simple and inexpensive manner for folks to do so. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, please. So the first question I see is, we only have 2 employees and they're both part-time. Are we required to still comply with this? And the answer is yes. Under employer is defined as someone that has any employees at all. So technically, if you're a sole proprietor and you pay yourself as a W-2 employee, you are still required to comply with the statute. So, in that regard, if you have 2 folks, I would definitely do it. If you are a solo business, a single member LLC, but you say you pay yourself as a W-2, technically you're supposed to. I can't imagine that you will complain or report yourself to Virginia OSHA, so you can make that determination yourself whether you're going to go ahead and do it or not. Let's see, another question. We're a government contractor, and we have offices for primarily administrative purposes, and then we also have employees working at a federal facility are required to comply with the statute. Again, the answer there, there's a little bit of a trick there because, as we said, if you're located within a federal facility, you may not need to comply, but for the company as a whole, you need to have the procedures in place because you have employees working not in a federal facility. For those administrative offsite employees, you definitely need to have something in place. So we have another question here, which was, how do you suggest that we do the training for our workplace now that in particular most of our employees are working remotely? And that's a good question. What we've had a number of people do in this circumstance is to email out the information to their clients, to conduct webinars with the training. We've had a few clients that have asked us to help lead the training for them, which obviously we're happy to do. And we've had a number of clients who have asked us not only to help them with not only the forms and the forms generator, but helping us implement them also. David, if there's more questions, could you read one or two questions? I think you brought it up on the screen.
Sure. The next question is, are we able to use a combination of tests and symptom-based strategy for the return to work decision? The answer is no. You have to pick one and stick with it. That is part of the requirements of the regulation. There's pros and cons to both, and that's a determination that each employer has to do. But at the end of the day, you can only use one. And
the CDC has made a recommendation recently that they are leaning towards and recommending that the symptom-based return to work be implemented, right?
Yes. And now that testing is becoming a little bit more accessible and widespread, they are recommending that a test-based strategy is used.
Yeah, excuse me, test-based strategy.
Excuse me. The next one says, we have 650 EEs and only 50 remote workers. Will package 2 cover both employees that will eventually returning and employees that never left?
So in that regard, everything that I've seen does not differentiate between, where your employees are working now necessarily. So there's the coverage issue. So in that regard, I would go through, determine whether you want if you're, a low or medium employer, because obviously if you are medium, you're going to be in the higher risk category since you have so many employees. So in that regard, that is the package you would get. And from that package, it can help lead you through what you need to do to put the policies, procedures, and training in place for compliance. As such a large employer, it's, and I'll say this as a disclaimer, we tried to create a simple and affordable solution that can work for almost all employers. Sometimes they're going to be, a very large employer that has something unique about it. We have not encountered that yet, but you always want to look at your particular circumstances and make sure that it is effective and works properly for you. It should, but as a 650 employee company, I imagine you also have either in-house legal counsel or other legal counsel you work with that, just out of the abundance of caution, as a lawyer myself, I would always suggest just take an extra step in that regard since you are such a large company. Next question.
The next question is there a separate policy for employees teleworking? Yes and no. I think the short answer is if your employees are planning on returning to an office space, then yes, you must comply with this before they come back to the office space. However, if you're moving remote fully for the remainder of the employee's employment, then that's on I would say a case-by-case basis, and more likely than not, you probably, like Merritt said, nobody's gonna, come knocking at your door if you don't have this.
Well, I think, again, just to add on to that, the requirement does not say, the requirement is based on employees. The requirement does not say, you have 10 employees or 20 employees that are showing up to an office or, a warehouse or a restaurant facility every day. It defines it as employees that are actually working. So technically, as the statute is interpreted, it is working employees, doesn't make the differentiation between whether they're teleworking or not. So again, I think purely as it relates to the statute, you need to comply and get the the forms, policies, procedures in place. Next question.
The next question we got is, I am an employee for a church. I assume that churches must also comply with the law.
Yes. And in fact, I know we've had probably at least one or two, if not more, churches, synagogues who have purchased this, assuming, of course, that the church has employees. If the church is, a rotating minister, preacher, and only has volunteers, then it may not meet the standard of having the employees in place. But if the church has W-2 employees, which many churches do, then yes, you should get this in place. There are no religious exceptions.
The next question we have, that the ETS, somebody was reading saying that the ETS will expire 6 months from the effective date, but it is being considered for adoption for a permanent standard. Yes, that is correct. Both the legislature and the Virginia Safety and Health Codes Board are both considering adopting this as a permanent standard. They have not taken any action on this yet, but so for now, it's only a 6-month temporary standard, but we are keeping a close eye on it, and we will make updates as necessary if this becomes a permanent thing. And there was a follow-up question to that: how probable is permanent? That's difficult to say. It all depends on how the situation improves, if it worsens, if it remains the same. I think it's an ongoing debate, and we just have to wait and see how the legislature votes and how the safety codes vote.
I think it'll also depend on, Virginia, after historically being a very pro-employer state, so it's primarily governor and/or legislature was primarily Republican. There's been a significant shift in the past, and within 2020, let's say, where the elected legislature is now primarily Democrat and has been putting in more, and a Democratic governor. So we have more employee-friendly statutes. One reason why I think that this statute was put in place, the emergency temporary standard. And I think if it is determined that this has had a benefit to the state, and having policies and procedures like this is just good practice to keep Virginia employers and employees and the population safe, then I think it's more likely in that regard that they might put in, make this a permanent standard. So were there any other questions? I think that is the end of the questions. Hope that this was helpful for everyone. Please use the webinar discount code, all caps webinar, to get the 10% discount. It looks as though, as we've been talking, I think I got a pop-up email that at least 1 or 2 people have already gone ahead and purchased using that, so thank you. You can email us, at vesforms@gcpc.com with any questions. You can also just track us down through our website if need be with any questions. But thank you so much. We hope this was helpful for you, and we hope that you check out the VES Forms generator and find it helpful and purchase it. So thank you so much. Take care.